Hi everyone, I'm Alicia Fioretta, Content Strategist for Retail TouchPoints, and I have joining me right now George Lawrie, who is the Vice President and Principal Analyst of Forrester Research. George, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
So you kicked off the Revionics Insight Show today by touching on some really interesting trends, especially around consumers' perceptions of pricing and promotions. So I'd love to hear, a quick overview of what you believe the key trends really are today, and maybe even some of the challenges that retailers are facing in keeping up with these trends.
Well, I'd say that certainly the consumer's behavior is changing, but actually the change and the problem goes further back than that. Almost every retailer that will be looking at this or that was in the audience today has a much larger range of merchandise than ever they did before. So where they might have carried a few 100,000 items, they're probably carrying, hundreds and hundreds of thousands now. And the difficulty for them is to actually price those. The real difficulty is to price them given that they have competitors like Amazon who are making changes, automated changes, 3 million a day. That's a big challenge. That's one of your competitors. And so that's one of the things, is that the range of work to be done is much wider, and the intensity, the speed at which it has to happen is much, much, much faster. And here's the reason behind it. You hinted at it already, that the customers themselves are highly empowered. They no longer, as somebody said, they no longer go shopping. They're shopping all the time, and they know what prices are. They're doing price comparisons all the time. So you need to figure out how to stay on top of your game, given the breadth of the problem, the very demanding nature of the customers, and the strength of the competition.
No, absolutely. I think you laid a great foundation there, and it seems like it's an incredibly daunting challenge for retailers to keep pace with all these competitive pressures and do it at the speed, as you said earlier in your response. So, what trends or best practices do you think really need to not only be recognized but also be applied for retailers to remain competitive and profitable?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that we talked about quite a lot in the session, and we've seen this over and over again with retailers, is that you can't really just think about the price at a SKU or SKU store level. You've got to start understanding what basically drives the value to the customer. And we talked a lot about this, that customers don't really want to be promoted to. What they want is a value proposition that's unique to them. Now, unfortunately, in order to do that, you've got to understand not just the item, but the attributes that make it attractive. And the smartest retailers are looking at the elasticity or the attractiveness and the price relationship of each of those attributes. How much does the freshness matter? How much does the color matter? And so on. So that's really the foundation, is to try and actually understand the merchandise further. Once you go beyond that, it's then understanding the propensity of different segments of people to buy and what really makes something attractive to them. It might be a location, it might be availability. One of the examples we looked at, we saw that people are quite happy to pay a bit more for something they can get their hands on right now, if they have an urgent need for it. So you can see that time matters and place matters, and also the attributes, the qualities of the merchandise itself.
Right, so it seems like there are many layers of data and information that retailers need to be able to not only collect but analyze and put into action, not only the product and from the product and business level, but also the consumer level too.
You're absolutely right. And at the consumer level, the smartest ones are looking at these decision trees. So how do people make the decision and trade off? And what's the value of getting it now versus having something which is fresher or more fashionable or whatever it might be? So you're exactly right. It's a hugely data-intensive operation. And I think we saw some evidence today, some of the data that I've collected, that retailers are doing a great job of harvesting data from all over the place. I think we saw 42% of them harvesting data from social networks. Fantastic. The difficulty is now, what do you do with it?
Right.
One of the shoe retailers, I talked to a buyer there, and he said, great, I can see that yellow is trending. So how many more thousands of pairs of yellow shoes do I buy? And how do I price them versus the red ones? And which stores do I put them in? These very, very compute-intensive activities. And generally speaking, I'd say that retailers, while they might gather the data, it's very hard for them to know how to process it. One grocer put it very well to me. I talked to him about predictive models for pricing and multivariate regression. And he said, just stop a minute. He said, my guys are really experts in cucumbers, not statistics. He said, we need something that's very consumable. And by the way, we don't have the compute capacity to handle this. And if you look at the people who are typically doing it, they're using cloud capacity because you need to turn it on and turn it off. Makes sense. If you're competing with Amazon, they've got the biggest cloud in the world.
Right. No, I think you bring up a lot of really great points. So to that end, as retailers continue to try to improve and optimize their pricing and promotion strategies, especially as we go into the holiday season and 2016 planning. I mean, where do you think retailers should really be focusing, their investments and their strategies? What should they be placing their bets on for the year ahead?
Okay, I mean, it's interesting you talk about the holiday season. We do a survey. We have a big customer panel, and we survey them about their holiday shopping experience. And invariably, we find that a significant number of them forget to buy any presents until it's too late. It's too late for them to be delivered.
Right.
They go shopping online. They then want to click and collect. And one of the biggest problems we saw that they expect the price to be the same online and in the store.
Interesting.
That's a bit of a challenge, really. And I think some of them are beginning to mature and to understand maybe that isn't a realistic value proposition. And you can see that Walmart actually does say the price is cheaper online than it is in the store. But getting back to the holiday, the big problem is they don't know what they've actually got in the store. They might know it in a general way, but if you're looking for a particular size or a particular color, that's still a very big challenge. Most of the ones that we deal with, they might route the order to a store, but it needs to be confirmed that it can be picked.
No, that's great, George. So you provided a lot of great feedback around, the trends, the challenges, and also the things that retailers really need to keep in mind. Do you have any final tips or best practices for all of the retailers watching this video right now?
Well, I mean, it sounds terribly intimidating, especially when you think about the amount of data you need to collect, the complexity of the models that you'll need to generate. I think the one thing I would say is that everybody who's been successful at this, they started small, and they started with just perhaps one or two categories. So they didn't try and boil the ocean, and they didn't try to get, we heard today in the case studies, they didn't try and fix all their data problems at once. They tried to get the data just good enough to learn, and then they started progressively applying their prices, their rules. All of them have rules. Eventually, those rules, you can learn something from those and from testing and learning. And the great thing about using a platform that enables them to run simulations is that they can try in advance what might happen. And we saw some examples, we talked a bit about it today, of people who've suddenly changed their pricing policy and really dramatically upset their customers. The great thing with a platform is that you can try this out before you actually do it. And so my advice would be to take some old data, to use one of these platforms and to see what might be the result if we started to apply some science to do the heavy lifting for the art that our merchants have.
Oh, that's great. Some really good advice there, George. So I really appreciate you taking the time out to walk me through all the trends that you're seeing, the research that you've done. I think you provided a lot of really helpful tips and best practices for all the retailers watching. So
Thank you.
Appreciate you taking the time out to speak with me today.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone out there for watching.